Right, so the goal of this session is to share with you what we're building at Avalonia UI. The title is about modernizing WPF apps, but I think we're going to talk a little bit more broadly about cross-platform .NET and how we're approaching it at Avalonia. So who is this guy? Well, I've had a little bit of an introduction, but I've really spent my career in cross-platform. So before I joined Xamarin, I worked building apps using Qt or Qt, depending on how you want to say it, which is cross-platform C++. And we needed to build mobile apps, and I'd gone through building web apps with like Sencha Touch and jQuery Mobile, and eventually found Xamarin, and I started falling in love with that technology. I've been a .NET developer since I was 13, so a long time building with .NET, and it was nice to be able to get back into .NET through Xamarin. I joined as an early employee. I stayed all the way through the acquisition, various different roles at Microsoft. But I kind of felt that the problem of cross-platform .NET just in general hasn't really been solved. So I joined Avalonia to try and spearhead fixing that problem and resolving the pain points that we're still seeing. You know, it's over a decade on since I joined Xamarin, and I don't think that we've quite solved everything that needs to be solved in this space. So what is the problem? Well, we love Microsoft. I love Microsoft. I spent 7 years there. But there's this kind of pattern of trying to reinvent the wheel every few years. Now, .NET is undeniably an enterprise technology. More than 60% of organizations that build with .NET have more than 10,000 employees. The thing that enterprises value the most is stability. And we're not just talking about, does my app crash? We're talking about API stability and stability in the technologies that they invest in. So if we think about the journey of an enterprise, they may have built with WinForms, and then WPF came out 4 years later. So they start rebuilding in WPF. And then we had UWP, which turned into WinUI, and we've now got multiple versions of WinUI. It's a deeply unpopular technology. Even the message from Microsoft right now is reasonably confusing. It's seeing negative year-on-year growth, and it's just not very popular. And you can see it from the message. Microsoft is now back to pushing WPF because it's almost like they've realized that WinUI isn't working out and isn't seeing that growth that they need. So this year at Build, we saw WPF front and center again, which is fantastic to see. But it still doesn't solve the problem that enterprises that are building with WPF are getting stuck on Windows. And if we look at the adoption rate or market share of Windows, it is dropping. More and more users are using mobile devices as their primary means of computing. They're using macOS, and in other regions around the world, Linux is really taking off. So this is a problem. If you're an enterprise and you've invested heavily in WinForms and WPF, there isn't really a sensible modernization strategy coming out of Redmond. So yeah, we see this kind of hitting reset every few years on the ecosystem, which is really damaging for those that have adopted the technologies. And so on the desktop side, it's a real sad state of affairs where we are today. And then on the mobile side, Xamarin Forms, it had a rocky start. There's no question of that. When I was at Xamarin, its code name was Duplo, which is Lego so big that children can't swallow it and choke on it. So it's like designed as this kind of large building block that should be easy to use. And it got used in ways that were unexpected. And that was an engineering challenge at the beginning. But I think by the end of Xamarin Forms, it was a really stable, mature, and fantastic cross-platform SDK for building mobile apps. And following the previous pattern, Microsoft hit reset on all of that. And it disrupts the ecosystem. And it's just, in my mind, it's not a sound strategy. technologies like this should be mature and they should be stable, and you should be able to build on them for a decade or more without having to, go through significant pain to update your app. All of this is to say that there are tons of enterprises out there and developers, possibly yourselves. You've got these mission critical applications that are built with legacy technologies, and there's no good solution coming out of Redmond on how to modernize that and bring that into 2025, which we're approaching. So that's really the problem that we're trying to solve with Avalonia and Avalonia XPF. So let's start with, well, what is Avalonia? It's a cross-platform, MIT licensed UI framework, and it's modern. So it's like WPF, but it isn't WPF. So it's inspired by, but we're not, a one-to-one copy. It allows you to build for Windows, macOS, desktop, and embedded Linux. So if you want to run on low-powered devices, this is a Pi, so it's reasonably high-powered in the scheme of things. But if you want to run on very low-powered embedded devices, then you can do that with Avalonia. We run on iOS and Android, and we also run in the browser using WebAssembly. So we've got a huge array of different platforms that are supported. Now, we do this by rendering to a canvas, which I'll get on later. But what it means is that you get a write once, run anywhere SDK. And this is really important because by rendering to the canvas, you're controlling the full rendering stack, and the not relying too much on these specific platforms. It becomes really easy for us to support new emerging platforms that may come out in the future. So the community have Tizen OS running. I think there was WebOS was also running. Someone got that going. Someone was running it on a Android watch. Someone was running it in their car, which I thought was mad, like the infotainment system. It runs everywhere. And that's, as I say, because it's designed to be cross-platform from the ground up. Performance is built in. So I think it's safe to say we're the fastest .NET UI technology that's cross-platform. We've got the benchmarks to show this. And again, this is because we're not having to make compromises to support any given platform. We're cross-platform from the ground up. We have very broad support for languages and architectures. So right now we support C# and F# officially. Any .NET language will work. So if you're building with VB.NET, that's also workable. If you're building with COBOL.NET, that should also work, but I would question your sanity. We support x86, x64, ARM64, and technically speaking, WASM should also be considered an architecture that we support, but not really. It's kind of in a grey area, but technically speaking, it should be there as well. So I talked a little bit about the canvas. So in the previous video, you saw that everything was rendered to a canvas. This is a really popular way of building apps. If we think about the web technologies that lots of folks are starting to use. When I started at Xamarin, the web ecosystem for building apps was terrible, genuinely terrible. It's why I sought out Xamarin in the first place. But that ecosystem has matured and it's pretty good. But ultimately, it's a web page, and so you're rendering to a canvas. And we see this with technologies like Flutter. That's also rendering to a canvas. And we render to a canvas as well. So we're not using native controls. When you ask for a button, it's not a UI button for iOS or an Android.widget.button on Android. You're getting, with an Avalonia app, you're getting a canvas, and then we draw everything inside of it. Much like how Flutter works, or in fact, WPF. This has a huge benefit, as I said before. We can run on a huge diverse number of different operating systems, and you get the same look and feel by default across all of them. It's very themable. You can customize anything that you want within an Avalonia application. Our architecture is very modular, So you don't have to use Skier Sharp. We have our own internal fork of well, it's not really a fork of Skier Sharp, but we have our own bindings to Skier that are slightly more performant than Skier Sharp. So we're not like glued to that. We can replace that in the future if we need to or want to. And then we also have DirectX support as well. So if you're running on Windows and you don't want to use Skier Sharp, then you can just use DirectX. The key part of this layer, this Skier Sharp DirectX layer, is that this is the canvas part that we're drawing to, and then Avalonia is responsible for creating the the array, the frame buffer that we're going to display within that canvas. We support common language runtime, so the core CLR, the modern .NET. We also support old .NET framework if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could do that if you wanted to. You could, I guess, use Mono on macOS and Linux or even Windows, but there's no real reason to do that. So that CLR gives us Windows, macOS, and Linux, and then we're using the Mono runtime for iOS, Android, and the browser. Now, if any of you follow me on social media, you may know that I'm not a particularly big fan of the Mono runtime. I think it was good many years ago, but it hasn't had enough investment in it, and it causes all manner of performance issues. Less so on iOS. iOS is reasonably performant, but on Android it can be very, very slow, and on browser it's almost unworkable. So we're internally working on trying to bring AOT support for the browser. We've got proof of concept that demonstrates that, and the performance is much, much faster. And we've been working on removing the Mono runtime dependency on Android as well in order to increase performance. And I can show you a video. On the left is our proof of concept. It's quite old now, but on the right is the standard way of building a optimized .NET Android application, and the performance difference is stark. So performance is built in. That's really important for us. So yeah, 3.15 faster in app startup times with our proof of concept, and that was only a morning's work. We didn't invest a lot of time in that. It was just to see can we drop this mono dependency. So who's using Avalonia? Well, it's a who's list, really. It's incredibly popular. So with Microsoft were a customer. JetBrains are building with us. KLM. There's also Bosch, Texas Instruments, Autodesk. It's just a huge number of large enterprises that are adopting Avalonia as their preferred technology. And what I find fascinating about this is that I think it's worth framing today's content that you're going to see. From looking at the lineup, you've got content from Maui, you've got content from us, and then you've got content from Uno platform. And we're the only one out of any of the UI technologies in this space that doesn't have a marketing team. We have no one in the organization that does marketing. So our adoption is driven by building an incredible UI framework. And when we're speaking to potential users and potential customers for Avalonia, and we're asked to do comparisons, we'll always just say, just go and try. I think that's, if there's going to be a takeaway from today's sessions, all of them, is to look past the marketing, to look past the shiny, and go and try. Go and try each technology and see which one resonates with you, which developer experience is the richest and the best. Which solution can you just clone from GitHub and hit F5 and it runs and it works, versus ignoring. Yeah, really, I'm almost telling you to ignore everything I say and just try it. But to do that for all the speakers you hear today, because we're all biased. Anyway, lots of companies are building with us. We have huge community numbers. So we're the highest starred of any .NET UI technology on GitHub. We have 64.4 million package downloads as of this morning. If we included our nightly feeds in that, it would be much, much higher, but we don't. That's just stable versions. I think that's a really important distinction when we're looking at package downloads. We've got 445 contributors helping us build Avalonia. So there's a company behind this. It's called Avalonia UI, and there's 11 of us in the company right now. It'll be 12 in January. But it's not just us building the platform. There are a huge community of people helping us make Avalonia a reality. And then we've got almost 250,000 Visual Studio extension downloads. So we have extensions for Visual Studio Code, and JetBrains Rider. In fact, the Rider extension is built by a team member at JetBrains, and then Rider itself natively understands Avalonia XAML. Because JetBrains are building with Avalonia, they wanted to make their tooling rock solid for their own use, but that benefits everybody. So there's really good tooling there. And I always say that technologies like Avalonia and like Maui, they live and die by the ecosystem that they exist within. If it was just what we were offering and there weren't a rich number of third parties building around the technology, then it wouldn't be a very attractive offering. So we're really fortunate to have a great ecosystem that is expanding on a kind of weekly basis at this point. I'm not joking, but just this morning, someone messaged to say that they're releasing a full suite of UI controls. They're not even on this list. It was so new to me, which I'm going to demo their demo app to show you what they've built, which are pro controls for Avalonia. So this is incredible to see the partnerships that we're building. And it lends into the narrative that we're fastly becoming the leading UI technology for .NET developers. The third parties are starting to put their faith and trust and investing in building for Avalonia as they've looked around at the ecosystem and they said, no, this is the technology to invest in. So with all that, let's open up Rider and let's have a look at some stuff. I'll minimize this puppy. If you want to learn some more, go to our website. I think to start with, let's give this some thought. What shall I show you first? To start with, let's open up. I'm going to show you a really cool app that is built with Avalonia. So I don't have the source code for this because this is a production application. But if we go to like About, you can see, powered by Avalonia. This is a full kind of vector graphics application, so it's a little bit like Sketch or like Figma. It's really powerful. I'm not a very good designer, but we can try. This is free to use. It's cross-platform. It runs on Windows, macOS, and Linux. It's got the ability to work on the project with multiple people all at once. Yeah, it's very powerful application and a great example of what people can build with Avalonia. We're an extremely powerful UI framework. So in terms of the developer experience, it's just like what you would expect with building any cross-platform .NET technology. So in terms of the templates, we have .NET App, MVVM app, and then cross-platform application. The cross-plat application is just, well, it only exists because we need the additional workloads for .NET iOS, .NET Android, and WASM. If we don't care about those platforms, then we can just do MVVM app or app. And the difference is this is more like WinForms with the code behind, and this is more like WPF in terms of the project structure. We support Net9. The nice thing about Avalonia is that when there's a new version of .NET, we don't have to do any work to support it. It's really just a case of popping into the CS proj and incrementing the number. So when .NET 10 is available, that's all we'll have to do. And we will now be able to build for .NET 10. So this is another really nice thing. You know, other frameworks you're going to have to wait for support from the framework developer. For us, we just, it's going to work. Let's hit build on this solution. We've got the same kind of layout that you'd expect. It's MVVM. If we open up the XAML, which we've got here, we can have a look at the previewer. So this is a live instance of your app. So we don't have hot reload at the moment. That's coming reasonably soon. But we have a live previewer. So if I, for example, pop all of this into a stack panel, we'll make the spacing 50, so quite large. Let me copy that and pop it down here. We'll add a button. Let's say horizontal alignment center. Click me. We could, in fact, we could do a command, or we could do a click event. So the click event would be like if we were doing WPF, if we were doing WinForms, so going into the code behind. Now I haven't actually named this text box. Let's give it a name or an ID. No, name. TB. And then if I save that, we come in here, we could do something like tb.text equals you clicked me. I'm going to save that. If I rebuild, we should. There we go. We get that interactivity, so we can test out our applications views within the previewer here, which is very, very nice. I want to show you some more advanced projects that people have been building. I'll show you the control catalog. So this is like the kitchen sink demo app. We use this internally just for testing. It's not optimized for performance or anything like that. I only care about desktop right now. I probably don't have the workloads installed. It's looking like it's complaining about those. So this is to help us test and for users to understand all of the different features that are available within Avalonia. Now, you would have seen this earlier in the demo of the performance on iOS. On Android. This is the same app on my Mac here. And yeah, it's a great little example app for if you want to understand what's possible, which controls are available to you within Avalonia by default within the core library. And this is using our Fluent theme. Now we can go to settings and we can change. Here we go. Let's do dark. And just notice how quick that changes. Super, super quick. Or we can leave it at default and it will pick up the OS theme instead. There's also a simple theme. And theming is really important, as I say, because we draw everything ourselves and we're not dependent on any native controls. We can make it look however we want. And so there's some really nice themes from other folks. Let me see. Sample browser. I think this is from ActivePro. Yeah, ActivePro software. So they've got a really nice theme, and they've got some nice controls as well. So let's get this running. Here we go. So they've got a slightly different theme, but still looks great here on the desktop. The new bars product is really nice. Let's have a look at that quickly. So this is like that ribbon control that you would expect to see with Office. Yeah, this is really, really nice. And if we go to the fundamentals, it's got some additional UI controls, and then just in general how the theme looks here. And the theme is free to use, and they give away some of their additional controls as well. Really, really nice example of being able to customize exactly how your application is going to look. And also just lovely to see that folks like ActivePro are investing in building applications with Avalonia. I think, as I say, it's a huge testament to what we've built and the demand from large enterprises. And then the new thing, I forget what it was called. I think it's Demo Center. This is hot off the press. Let me see if I can find the link to show you their website. So these guys have created a suite of cross-platform UI controls for Avalonia developers. So this comes from I think their main business is building like CAD controls. So if we would like look at this kind of thing, but for designing PCBs, and they're building with Avalonia, and so they've got all these rich controls, and they've decided to create a package so that you can buy these controls yourself. So let's run their demo app. Got some red squigglies, but I think it should run. Here it is. And we can change the theme. Again, notice how performant it is. In terms of performance, let's go extreme. Let's add 1,000,000 rows and 1,000,000 columns and generate the data. And look how fast that is. I can grab the toolbar and just scroll down. The old lols per second test that the Maui team do, when we did it, we were approaching like 4 million lols per second. So we're incredibly performant. If you need performant cross-platform UI technology, this is the technology to use. Tree data grid. I'm just going to go through some of these. They've got a ribbon control themselves. Very, very pretty. What else? Nice chart. Lots of data. I saw some really nice charts in here earlier. Let's see if we can. Maybe it was the real-time data. Yeah, this one, I was like, wow. I make music in my spare time, so seeing this kind of control is like what I would expect to see within Logic Pro or one of my advanced audio unit plugins. What else have we got from here? They've got an IDE layout. This looks a bit like Visual Studio Code, but it's got the docking that you would expect from an IDE, which is nice, a nice little docking library. We've got some text editing. That's pretty wild. Yeah, it's, as I say, I only saw this morning, so this is like the second time I've opened the sample, and I'm seeing new things already. So it's nice to see that the ecosystem is expanding. As I say, these technologies, they live and die by the ecosystem that they exist within. Right. So that's Avalonia. As I say, we build for, well, you can build for iOS, Android, Linux, macOS, WebAssembly. Like we target everything, and that's free to use. So in fact, if we go to GitHub /Avalonia UI /Avalonia, you can see you can come and grab this code. It's MIT licensed. Huge community of people building with us. Oh, we've got an extra star. You should come and star it if you haven't. And the core team are here answering questions. So if you ever get stuck on anything, there's a good chance that someone from the team, like Max, will come along and help you. It's free to use, been adopted by a huge number of organizations. Yeah, check out Avalonia for your next application. Now, that's a great solution if you're building from scratch or you've got the ability to do a manual port. So as a business, we were created in 2019. And the first half of our story was really helping organizations with existing WPF apps migrate. So like Schneider Electric, Moody's Analytics, they had these WPF applications and they wanted to be able to target macOS or Linux, new platforms in general. So we were spending a lot of time porting those applications for those customers, and we thought that there had to be a better way of doing this. We didn't want to spend our lives porting code. It's not very exciting. So we decided to investigate forking WPF and replacing the internals with Avalonia so that we could make a cross-platform WPF. And that's precisely what we've done. I think it's important to understand, well, how does WPF actually work? So in terms of the general architecture, I mean, Microsoft has been saying for 20 odd years that it's impossible to make this cross-platform. It's not impossible, it's just a huge amount of work. So it's important to note that we're not taking C++ code and running it through converters, because that would just be, in my opinion, mad. Instead, what we've done is presentation framework and presentation core. Well, that's managed code. That is C# code. And then everything below that is where it gets tricky for WPF, specifically mil core. So this is the media integration layer. It's the compositional renderer of WPF. It's taking your controls and it's creating the frame array of pixel data that gets displayed within DirectX. It's this layer that we get rid of. So the architecture of XPF is much simpler in the scheme of things. We've kept presentation framework and presentation core largely unchanged. We've done this in order to ensure compatibility so that third-party controls will just work. And then we have Avalonia, which sits on top of Skier Sharp. And so we can get a broad range of support of platforms with Avalonia XPF. And your application, the only real change you need to make is updating the CS proj. You'll be changing the project SDK from WPF, which is Windows.desktop, over to Avalonia XPF. You hit build, boom, you're now running your WPF application on brand new platforms. And the really important part of this is that you can bring your dependencies. So this is when you've got a 20-year-old mission critical WPF application, the problem of bringing that to new platforms is that you more often than not, you've built it with heavy reliance on Telerik or DevExpress or ActivePro, Syncfusion, or one of the many control vendors that exist out there. And there aren't good solutions to bring those cross-platform. You know, we've seen ActivePro are starting to build for Avalonia, but not every single control is available today. So what do? Well, you can use XPF. And as far as the controls are aware, you know, we're grabbing them from NuGet. They just work. They think that they're running on Windows. And I'm going to show you a demo by running a Syncfusion sample app on XPF. So let's pop back into Rider. And here we go. So the change here is, we'll close the other tabs. The change is in this project SDK. So we've changed it to Avalonia XPF. Somewhere in here will be the license because it's a licensed product. But apart from that, we're not making any changes to the code base. So I can hit debug and we will be able to launch this Syncfusion demo application here on macOS. There we go. And we can have a look at, let's have a look at all the controls. So like the data grid. There we go. And this is pure WPF. I mean, you can see the window decoration is a little bit strange because there's been no code changes and it's using custom window decorations. 3D charts. There we go. All just works. What else? What else should I show you in here? Kind of scanning to see what are the more interesting UI controls that are, for me at least, interesting. I mean, this Kanban, that's going to show some drag and drop. There we go. Drag and drop is quite a difficult thing to get right. but you can see it just works. Beautiful. What else? Dun, 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 dun. Oh, that's probably it for in here. Yeah, the image editor. That's this is one I always like to show, because again, keep in mind this is just the standard WPF NuGet packages. We're not doing any IL patching or any modification to this package. It just works. And this is really the key point of XPF. XPF is magic. It's genuinely is incredible to be able to make WPF cross-platform and run on these new platforms. And it's only possible because we've spent a decade, or more than a decade, building Avalonia to be an incredible cross-platform UI tech. The last thing I want to show you, let's have a look. Applications. I think I've installed it. Let's have a look. Perhaps I haven't. LinkPad. So I'm sure you all know of LinkPad. This is one of our favorite applications. This is the ability to run like little snippets of .NET. So Joe from LinkPad contacted us and said, "Hey, I'd like to bring LinkPad to macOS." And if you see here, LinkPad for macOS is powered by Avalonia XPF. So a really nice example of a very complex WPF application in the scheme of things, now running on macOS. And I think we gave Joe the license, or he bought the license in August. So, this is wrapping up. It's almost ready for release. He had some win forms he had to get rid of, but the WPF pieces just came over, and you've got the native menu integrations. It's a really nice example of what's possible with Avalonia XPF. So I'm almost done. I think, as I said before, you're going to see a lot of interesting technology today. I've just shown you, I think, 2 incredible bits of technology, but I think it's important for you to take the time to go and try everything that you see what that developer experience is like, and see which works for you. Yeah, I think that would be my message, my call to action to you. Go and play with the tech, see what works, see what doesn't, see what gels, see what you like.